Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about standardization versus adaptation, which is a choice that many MNCs, multinational corporations, and indeed many other companies face when they are looking at going into a particular market, a particular geographical market. So our learning objectives today are to understand the concepts of standardization, adaptation and localization. I'll come onto localization later. Identify the different factors that may affect a management decision to either standardize or adapt or to go for this localization, and thirdly, to understand the importance of culture in that decision. So what's it all about? Well, standardization essentially means to use the same product in one marketplace as in another marketplace, and to use that same product across the whole world. It's an old debate that goes back around 40 plus years, so by no means nothing new, but it's recently come to the fore again as the COVID-19 pandemic has resurrected a lot of things that we thought were in the past, such as protectionism and anti-globalization. And indeed, we've seen an increased preference for local products as a result. And this is particularly important for MNCs as an increasing proportion of their revenue has been coming from emerging markets in recent years. And as a result, getting this strategy right has been described as critical. Getting this choice right has been described as a critical strategy for multinational corporations and indeed any company, any organisation looking to expand and sell their product or service in different geographical markets. So, as I say, it goes back quite a good few years, back to the 1970s and early 1980s, when Ted Levitt wrote his seminal paper on the subject, The Globalization of Markets, which was published in the Harvard Business Review. And his argument was essentially that technology is enabling a global homogenization of consumer needs and desires. You know, the needs of a consumer in one area of the world becoming closer and closer to the needs and desires of a consumer in another part of the world, which enables multinational corporations to basically offer the same high quality, low cost product globally. And what that actually allows the MNCs to do is to benefit from economies of scale, with, as Levitt describes it, the standardization of production, distribution, marketing and management across the globe. However, as much as this has been described as having aroused the imagination of many executives and been something that has really kind of opened opportunities and opened doors for them, it's also been criticised as being very product orientated. This goes back to, if you think about product orientation, this idea that you can have any, of Henry Ford, that you can have any colour of Model T Ford as long as it's black. It's very much orientated towards the needs of the producer, the manufacturer, rather than market orientation, which is very much orientated towards the needs of the consumer. And there's also been criticism that this whole idea of standardization fails to take into account cultural differences between different markets and therefore could be a mistake. And as a consequence, many people do actually argue that adaptation, in other words, changing the product from each different market or for each different market, may actually be a better strategy to adopt. And that, of course, includes people like Kotler. So the arguments for standardization basically center around cost. You enable lower costs for the company through economies of scale, which means that you may well be able to sell the product cheaper or make more profit. So you may well end up with superior business performance, increased efficiency, and it's even been described as key for survival and growth for many of these MNCs. But on the other side of the arguments in favour of adaptation is that it simply might not be possible to standardise and produce one product globally. It may be impractical, it may just be unwise, and that therefore adaptation often offers greater value, particularly as that meets in with local preferences for local products and products that closely match their local culture, which could, of course, go on to strengthen a company's competitive position. So, many people don't actually see this as a straightforward choice between you've either got to standardise or you've got to adapt. They see it very much as a continuum rather than as that plain dichotomy of two simple choices, and that the decision should really be what degree of standardization can you effectively achieve between your various different geographical marketplaces. And the idea is essentially what you're doing is compromising or balancing the benefits of standardization, the cost savings, the cost efficiencies, the cheaper cost to consumers perhaps, whilst recognizing that local preferences exist and serving those local preferences. And this has been termed as localization, which is where my earlier references come from. So you have this continuum from standardization to adaptation, with localization kind of in the middle, as the diagram indicates. So factors that may affect the decision, whether to standardize or to adapt: the economic financial benefits, which we've talked about, these costs, scale, the economies of scale. Obviously, a precondition is, are there homogeneous market segments across different geographical boundaries? You need a technologically stable marketplace, but also you need to think about the abilities of the company itself. Do they have this global orientation? Do they have international experience? Have they got the ability to actually go into different markets? Some do, but some don't. And also cultural differences, which, as I've mentioned, plays quite a big part. Also worth remembering, it's not just about the product. You can also think about standardizing the promotional strategy, because that offers similar advantages, costs, economies of scale, using one promotional campaign, one TV advert worldwide. And the web and the way the web has grown with digital technology has very much been seen as having the potential to actually enhance and improve that. But again, you're coming up to cultural differences, up against cultural differences, different customs, different languages, and so on and so forth, which might actually prove to be a barrier to that. And culture can affect the decision in a variety of ways: different tastes, different preferences. I, as a British person, have different tastes to many people in Southeast Asia or United States or South America. And we also interpret things in different ways. Black is a very lucky colour in certain parts of Southeast Asia. In the West, it's very much a colour associated with death and funerals. There may well be language issues, there may well be government sensitivities, and a couple of examples for you here. ESO, if you're talking about language issues, ESO, when it's pronounced in Japanese phonetically, is roughly the same as broken down car. Not really a good idea if you're trying to sell petrol. And the picture of Brad Pitt goes back to a Toyota advertising campaign a few years ago, where the Malaysian government took great exception to the fact that they'd used a Western actor and they banned the advert. So you also have to think about what the governments think about this. So to summarise, standardisation, same product across different marketplaces with all the cost advantages of economies of scale. Adaptation, adapt the product to suit local culture and preferences. And localisation is effectively a compromise between the two to gain the benefits of both. So that's it for this week, but to follow on from this week, what I'd like you to do is just go into culture a little bit more. So we're going to understand and address culture next week. So please read Chapter 7 of Hollinson Global Marketing, and then look at the Hofstede tool at that web address there, and look at your own country, assess your own country using that tool. You can find the different dimensions on page 248 of Hollinson. And then compare your home country and think about how it differs to the UK or the US and one other country of your choice, before finally going on to consider the cultural implications of those differences if you were to launch a new brand of makeup or perhaps a new car brand into each of those three countries, your home market, the UK or the US, and one other country of your choice. Thank you very much. See you next week. There's the reference list. Any questions?